Hello, I'm Simon Smith from the University of Birmingham's Shakespeare Institute in Stratford-upon-Avon. I've been using the Cambridge Shakespeare platform a lot recently when putting together reading lists, and the list I've put together here is called Being Critical with Shakespeare. This is a reading list which thinks about contemporary critical approaches to Shakespeare, and the idea is to equip students with the latest critical methodologies that they can put to use in their own work with Shakespeare. So this might function as a graduate reading list or an advanced undergraduate reading list. It might also be useful for someone preparing a Shakespeare dissertation as well, who's looking for up-to-date critical approaches. Each week we look at a different critical approach and we read a little collection of articles and essays that use versions of that method. These articles showcase the range of ways that people might put a certain method to use and also give students kind of a basic grounding. But the particular question being raised is how might I apply these methods in my own work, not just kind of what are these critics arguing? And there are some prompt questions to help with that. This material is all drawn from the Cambridge Shakespeare platform and would give a good kind of basis for students to then go out and read critical material more widely. So the first week of the module, we look at sensory studies and the way people have thought about Shakespeare and the senses. And in the second week, we turn to Shakespeare and race, thinking about pre-modern race studies as an important critical approach to Shakespeare, but also critical race theory more generally, and ways that people are thinking through questions of Shakespeare and race in relation to later performance and cultural contexts. The third week we turn to Shakespeare's resources, influences and intertexts, which is to say thinking about where Shakespeare got his ideas and his materials from, moving beyond more traditional source studies in keeping with up-to-the-minute critical approaches. The fourth week we turn to think about eco-critical Shakespeare's, both in terms of Shakespeare's engagement with his own environment and ecology and natural world, but also thinking about the way Shakespeare and Shakespeare performance in particular might feed into thinking about questions of environment, climate and ecology today. We turn to gender and sexuality next, and again, the articles we look at will be thinking both about how gender and sexuality were understood and thought about in Shakespeare's time, but also how Shakespeare performance and Shakespeare's texts might feed into later cultural conversations in these areas across the centuries up to today. We move on to think about textual studies and early modern publishing and print culture next, and the ways in which engaging with questions of where Shakespeare's texts come from might be important to students' critical writing. The final 3 weeks form a little cluster of work thinking about performance in various contexts. So the first of these 3 weeks, in week 7, we think about early modern performance and the challenges and opportunities of studying distanced historical performance culture. We turn next to Shakespeare in production all the way up to the present day, thinking about methods for studying productions rather than purely texts. And in the final week, we think about adaptation studies and reception, thinking about the many forms that Shakespeare might be transformed into, and the way that we might also think about reception, for example, in fan culture, as an important part of Shakespeare's onward cultural life. All of the materials are available very easily. All you need to do is click on the link and that will take you straight through to the Cambridge Shakespeare platform. If your library has a subscription to the platform, you'll be able to log in through Cambridge Core with your institutional login details and access those items straight away. I hope you find this reading list useful and that you encounter some criticism here which is helpful and inspiring for your own Shakespearean work.